Okay, I don't know if this card holder is better or worse than the first one, but we'll see. Anyway, here's a question from one of the listeners, but this one is a little bit more complex. So it's two questions combined into one. So the question is, if you're a Christian, what do you do when you've got non-Christian suitors? And the connected question is, what do you do with those emotions, the quote-unquote Kilig emotions? And this is obviously a question coming from women. The first thing I gotta say is we have to be very clear about something. The Bible says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers." Therefore, some churches might think that relationships between believers and unbelievers are, not really advisable, but it's okay. In our church, we take the Bible very seriously, and that is sin. And unequally yoked relationships or unequally yoked believers, at least in our church and many other churches I know of, that's subject to church discipline. Okay, so the Bible says do not. It's not a suggestion, it's a command. Do not. Okay, so I guess the first thing we got to do is figure out a few things. First and foremost, we got to figure out how temptation works. And one of the basic principles you got to remember is temptation always begins with a thought. Okay, it always begins with an idea in your mind, a thought that plays and plays in your head, and then it inserts emotions into your heart. Now, if you don't want kilig or the butterflies emotions in your heart, then one of the best things you can really do is to not entertain the thought. Now, let me address an argument. Some people say, "Oh, it's just a thought. It's harmless." What's so wrong with your imagination just daydreaming or fantasizing? Now, let me put it this way: I am married. If I fantasize or daydream being with a girl other than my wife, someone else who's not Rainy, all of you will think that I'm either inappropriately thinking thoughts or sinning, right? Some would even say that I am hardcore sinning. And you're gonna think that way because you know the power of thoughts. You know that we can be unfaithful in our thoughts. We can be evil in our thoughts when we indulge those things. So if that's evil for married men, why is it suddenly okay for singles to fantasize being with non-Christian partners? Right? There shouldn't be a double standard. If it's sinful for a married man to think of another woman aside from his wife, it is also just as sinful. Okay? It's just as sinful for Christian girls or guys who are single to be fantasizing being with non-Christian partners. All right, so that's the first thing we got to understand, that sin starts with the mind, it starts with a thought, and then it just makes things worse and worse from there. Now, what do you do if you've got a suitor who's not a Christian? Well, the best answer I can give you is to run away, to flee, to escape, to block, to ban the person from your social media. Whatever it takes, just get out of that situation. And let me address another thing. It's so much harder for women than it is for men. Why is it like that? Well, Genesis tells us that one of the curses that God gave to the woman is, or in other words, God said this: "Your desire will be for your man, and yet he will rule over you." And so the temptation for women to be loved, desired, complimented, to be pursued, longed for, it's so much greater than your average temptation. Women who just hear the words, "You're so lovely, you're so beautiful," or "I really like you," or "I really admire you," "You're so nice, you're so sweet." Those words are like hardcore temptations for women, okay? Like, if men are told, "I really admire you," men will just be like, "Well, thank you." There's that manly, "Thank you." "I think you're really kind." "I'm a gentleman." "Thank you." But when a woman hears that, "I really admire you," something happens in the heart. It's just totally different. And I know this because I am married, for one. Number two, I've counseled a lot of people about this. I've talked to so many people about this. Women find it more difficult to resist that temptation. And it's partly because of the fall. It is the desire for the man, and yet he will rule over you. Okay, so that's part of the curse. Now, of course, as Christians, we know that God has redeemed us, but still there is that flesh in us, there's that flesh in you that still desires it. So you just gotta really remember that, these are temptations, don't just drop on you big time. They insert thoughts in your head, and you go from, my heart is so sealed for the Lord, to, oh, maybe reading one text won't hurt. And then maybe, I enjoy hearing that I'm pretty, that I'm beautiful. I enjoy hearing that he really desires me, he longs for me, he feels sick if he's without me. It feels so good. As long as we're not dating, as long as I don't go out with him, maybe it's okay. And then maybe one date is fine. So you guys know where I'm headed, right? So it's one little step after another step after another step, and it's just gonna get worse and worse and worse. So the best thing to do, in my opinion, is just to block them, just to ban them, just to ignore them, get out of their space, or make them get out of your space, to avoid them quite literally on your social media, on digital, on your phone, in person. Just avoid them, because you know that your heart can very easily be swayed. All right, so how do you deal with kilig? Just kill it. Okay, now of course, if it's a Christian who's pursuing you, that's a different story. But if you're a Christian lady and there's a non-Christian who's pursuing you, just flee. Treat the guy like an actual coronavirus cell. All right, so that's probably like the easiest thing you can do. Okay, so I hope that helped. God bless you guys.